Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're taking a highly structured, really analytical look at one of the most sobering topics you'll find in biblical literature, Judgment Day. But we're not just looking at it as some vague theological concept. Nope, we're examining it specifically through the lens of a legal process, because the ancient texts actually lay this event out like a literal theological courtroom. We're going to look at the specific mechanics, the evidence they present, and the ultimate verdict system so we can understand exactly how this ancient narrative structures the final judgment of humanity. All right, let's get into it.
Right out of the gate, the text sets this incredibly striking tone. Listen to this visceral warning from the Old Testament prophet Malachi. He writes, "Surely the day is coming. It will burn like a furnace. All the arrogant and every evildoer will be stubble." The authors here don't present Judgment Day as an allegory or a metaphor or just some ancient myth. No way. Within this framework, it's framed as an impending, inescapable reality, a totally guaranteed future event where the ultimate final judgment is rendered on mankind.
Now, what's really interesting about this chronological timeline is how the text establishes a clear precedent. This final judgment, it doesn't just come out of nowhere. It's heavily foreshadowed. If you look historically, during the Old Testament era, we see these localized judgments. Passages in Isaiah, for instance, pronounce very specific temporary judgments on nations like Damascus, Babylon, and Egypt. Then, moving forward on the timeline, the scriptures describe a future tribulation period, which is often associated with this massive great battle in Revelation. And then finally, at the very end of time, we hit the final ultimate judgment. So those earlier events are simply precursors. They point straight toward this ultimate reality. It is absolutely crucial to distinguish between these different events. You see, a really common misconception when people think of Judgment Day is that apocalyptic imagery of the great battle in Revelation 19, where the enemies of God are defeated. But if we actually look closely at the text, that's described as a temporal judgment, meaning it only affects the people who are alive at that specific moment in time. The final judgment, on the other hand, is a completely different ballgame. It happens at the absolute end of time, and it encompasses literally everyone who has ever lived, handing down every single person's final eternal destiny. Okay, so this brings us to the real centerpiece of our explainer. Having established the timeline and the massive scope, the biblical text transitions us directly into the ultimate courtroom phase. This is the venue for the final trial of humanity, famously known in the text as the Great White Throne Judgment. Let's set the scene to understand exactly what this massive theological courtroom looks like and, who's actually present. The description provided in Revelation 20 is just, well, it's incredibly dramatic and massive in scale. It reads, "Then I saw a great white throne and him who was seated on it. The earth and the heavens fled from his presence, and there was no place for them. And I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne, and books were opened." Conceptually and visually, this passage establishes an arena that is so absolute, so overwhelmingly holy, that the physical universe itself, literally the earth and the heavens, actually flees from the presence of the judge. Let's break that scripture down into its distinct legal components just to see how this trial actually operates. First, you have the throne, which is the seat of ultimate authority. Then you have the judge, which the texts in John and Revelation identify as the Son, Jesus. Next are the defendants, and that includes all the dead, both great and small, which means your societal status, it offers zero protection here. And finally, you have the evidence, which are the books of works. The crucial point here is just how terrifyingly comprehensive this whole process is designed to be. No one escapes. Every single individual is brought into this courtroom, and everyone stands entirely alone, responsible solely for their own actions. So that brings us to the actual criteria for the verdict, which honestly is often misunderstood. The text mentions two separate types of records being opened up. First, you have the books of works. You can think of this as the ultimate, inescapable, permanent record. These volumes contain meticulous evidence of an individual's deeds throughout their entire life. And yes, the judgment is based on these works. But, and this brilliantly illustrates the core concept, the narrative makes it clear that this isn't just a simple scale where your good deeds are weighed against your bad deeds to see which side is heavier. Instead, the ultimate deciding factor is a completely different ledger altogether, the book of life. So how exactly does this verdict system function? Well, according to the strict rules of this courtroom, every person is judged by the indisputable evidence of their actions recorded in those books of works. Now, because every human is considered inherently sinful in this specific theological framework, those works are always going to yield a guilty verdict, every time. Therefore, ultimate entrance into heaven or hell is decided strictly by whether or not a defendant's name is recorded in the Lamb's Book of Life.
The absolute rule of this courtroom is this: if your name is missing from that specific book, the consequence is being cast into the lake of fire, which the text refers to as the second death. And right there, that presents a pretty stark theological problem, doesn't it? If the evidence in the books of works proves that everyone is a guilty sinner, and the standard is absolute perfection and holiness, then how could anyone possibly survive this trial? How on earth can a guilty person stand before a completely righteous judge, face the mountain of evidence of their own wrongdoings, and somehow manage to have their name written in the book of life to be pronounced not guilty? It is literally the ultimate high-stakes cliffhanger of the entire biblical narrative. But the text does provide a solution to this universal guilt. It introduces a very specific, almost loophole-like defense strategy for this courtroom. It's a legal and theological concept known as the pardon of justification by faith. This is the exact mechanism by which that guilty verdict is completely overturned. It totally shifts the dynamic of the great white throne judgment for anyone who possesses it. Let's see exactly how this builds into a cohesive legal defense. Romans 5:1 states that believers are justified by faith. Now, to be justified in this context means to be declared legally righteous by the judge. But here's the really vital thing to understand. This isn't because the defendant is actually innocent of their crimes. Not at all. Rather, they are declared righteous purely on the basis of Christ's perfect work acting on their behalf. It's essentially explained as an advanced rendering of justice. The trial has already been held, the penalty was paid on the cross, and the final judgment, it's been settled before the defendant even steps foot into the courtroom. As you can imagine, this creates two vastly different destinies within this legal framework. For the defendant walking into that courtroom without faith, they face the full, crushing weight of the evidence in the books of works. They face God's wrath and the second death. But for the defendant with faith, well, their name is already written in the Lamb's book of life. They literally have absolutely nothing to fear in this courtroom because their legal penalty was already borne by someone else. So for them, this terrifying courtroom scene actually transforms into a day of final rescue and total salvation from the effects of sin. This entire framework is so elegantly summarized in the book of Hebrews, chapter 9. It reads, "Just as people are destined to die once and after that to face judgment, so Christ was sacrificed once to take away the sins of many." That perfectly encapsulates the legal structure we've been examining today. You have a single physical death, followed by a single inescapable courtroom judgment, which is then ultimately resolved by a single substitutionary sacrifice. We've covered a lot of ground today, mapping out the intricate mechanics of this theological courtroom. From the undeniable evidence recorded in the books of works to the overriding pardon found in the book of life, the text clearly lays out a system of ultimate accountability alongside ultimate grace. So, I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to reflect on. If, within this framework, the final verdict for a believer is actually rendered in advance, how does that shift the immense weight of eternity? How does it change the way one views their everyday actions right now? It's a profound concept to unpack. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep questioning and keep learning.